seeing Heidi go through all these changes, having this healthy wife when you first got married, and then, suddenly the bottom falls out. What was going through your head?
Well, initially, and when I say initially, for years, I wasn't freaking out or too concerned about it. I always thought that she would get well. Mm-hmm. She hasn't mentioned a lot of the other ailments and struggles that she had. She had severe asthma. She eventually started having stroke-like episodes where she was a walker and a wheelchair part of the time. And for several years, even though she wasn't able to do a lot, I believed that she would be well. But once we reached the point where she was using a wheelchair, that's when things changed for me, and really the fear kicked in.
The fear kicked in.
And I was only 29 years old.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
So you had already been going through this now for 10 years.
Right.
And how many children did you have at this time?
I think we had three.
Okay,
yeah.
So now let's just back up the story here just a little bit. And, you know what? Actually, yeah, let me just ask about... Okay, I'll skip over that part. Let's talk about your children. All of your children are born with health challenges, correct? Let's start with Robbie, because that's going to kind of intercede a little bit to the 10-year mark there. So what was going on with Robbie at his birth?
Well, Robbie was the worst, but all of our kids were born with a problem in their airways, and it's called tracheolaryngeal malacia.
Oh, my God.
It's very rare, very, very rare. In fact, we were told we would not have any more children like that because it's so rare. You only have one. We were the first people in recorded medical history to have more than one child with it, and we had 4.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not. So cute at all. And what that means is his airway easily collapses. And with him, if he would cry, his airway would collapse. And if he cried really hard, we would have to resuscitate him.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
And you can only imagine the stress that you would feel over having a child need to be resuscitated because they cry.
No.
That's what babies do. They cry.
No, that I could. No, that I couldn't. No, that I had enough, but I didn't have that.
And so he came on monitors. We had an oxygen tank. And with him, sometimes we could just stimulate him, but, other times we had to resuscitate him. I can tell you a story. I can remember it like it was yesterday, where Robbie had stopped breathing, and I was trying to do mouth-to-mouth on him, and I could not inflate his lungs. And Robert grabbed him from me. He said, let me try. And he's trying, and it's not working, so we're like fighting over him. Let me try. So I grab him back, and I'm trying, and so it was like living on adrenaline. Day in and day out.
All the time, absolutely. Oh, my gosh. With Taryn's illness, I didn't have that to worry about. I had, some other things. Her disease was equally as rare, too. With the type of neutropenia that she had, only 325 people in the world had it at that time. And it's like, what are the odds? And what do you do when you're the only one in the middle of nowhere that has this type of disorder? There's no one to talk to about this. There's no one to reach out to. There's no one that really understands. So what happened then with Robbie?
And the thing is, because he was such an anomaly, we had doctors coming from all over to see him. I mean, it was not uncommon for me to see 20 doctors in a day, not because they were there to treat him, but because they wanted to see this anomaly that was alive.
Wow.
And in fact, I had one doctor come and meet me, and bless his heart for his bedside manners, but he said, I've never seen anything like that except on a corpse.
Oh, my God, Thanks. Right?
People say things like that to you. You just about want to fall over.
Yeah, they don't know what else to say. They just say something, right? I know.
And so he actually had 2 surgeries to change the configuration of his airway, but he had a second complication to his breathing issues, and a lot of kids are born with what's called GE reflux. They spit up. And some of them, it actually can be life-threatening because they start aspirating it, and that was the situation with our son. He was aspirated, but he was aspirating so much stomach acid that it was burning the inside of his lungs and scarring them, and we'd taken him to the hospital, and they'd done x-rays on his lungs, and in fact, it's kind of funny, the person who drove me to the hospital, because I wasn't driving, was the girl that Robert came up to see, his girlfriend, before he left on his mission. So Becky and I went to the hospital together, and the doctor looked at the x-rays, and he looked at me, and he told me that because of all the acid burning up his lungs, the Robbie had developed chronic lung disease, and it was a certain form of it. And I happened to know what it was only because when we were in the respiratory intensive care unit, the little boy in the bed across from us in the hospital had that disease.
Oh my
and
gosh,
so just from talking to that family, I knew it was fatal. I knew that you didn't live very many years, at least 20 years ago when this happened. And so at that point I was terrified. And I just went home because I understood that doctor was telling me that my little boy was going to die.
Yes.
Oh, my.
And I didn't have Rob with me. I had his ex-girlfriend with me, who was my friend, but, it just was...
It's not funny, but you got to find the humor.
Talk about support there,
It was kind of a crazy situation, and... we went home and we talked about it, and I kind of mentally started wrapping my head around the fact that here we'd made it through all these surgeries and all of these times where he'd stopped breathing, and this was going to take him.
Right, that's tough.
And we kind of talked to some people in our church and in our neighborhood, and the leaders in our local congregation decided that our local church congregation decided that they were going to ask everyone in that area, so there would have been about 8 congregations, so it would have been about 1,000 people ish, to have a special Sunday where everyone prayed and fasted for his life.
That's incredible.
And that took place, and then I believe it was about a month later we went back for to have his lungs x-rayed again, because that was going to be our normal routine from that point forward. And when we got to the hospital, they x-rayed him, and the doctor came back just as puzzled as could be. He said, the only explanation I have for this is that they brought me the wrong x-rays last time because your son's lungs are totally clear.
Wow. That's just amazing. That is amazing. And you got to wonder, you know what I mean? There's more going on here than meets the eye. So does he have any residual problems from that still, or I mean
No, he outgrew all of the breathing problems.
Oh my gosh.
And he actually outgrew brain damage, because after his second surgery, and let me just talk about, Kristen, you brought up the fact that you have to be an advocate for your kids.
Yes.
After Robbie's second surgery, he was in the recovery room, and I was watching the monitors, and I'd been in a hospital for a year with him. I knew what those monitors looked like and how to tell when they were reading right and when they weren't.
Sure.
And I watched his oxygen saturation levels drop down dangerously low, and I went and got a nurse, and I said, something's wrong with him, and she said, it was a man. He said, no, it's just not picking up right. I said, no, I know how to tell if it's picking up right, and he just wouldn't believe me. And so Rob and I went back to the nurse's station, and I said, I want to see the head nurse. And then I said, I want you to call our surgeon, and I want to talk to him. And we absolutely insisted on going over that nurse's head. And we talked to the surgeon, and he moved Robbie to the ICU. Within an hour, Robbie was crashing and having to be resuscitated, and he was put on a ventilator. He was having to have everything artificially done for him. He was not able to survive at that point by himself.
Oh, my.
And so had we not insisted on ignoring anybody who was going to tell us we didn't know what we were talking about, he would have died.
And I gotta commend you on that, because I had a few situations with my own daughter that, I in those 5 years, I knew so much about medicine that, I knew what was going on. I knew when they were not being truthful with me, and I knew, you have to fight, and it's like you're fighting for your life with these people, because if you don't take the initiative, look at what could have happened. I mean, after everything that you guys have been through. I mean, what an amazing story with that just completely just blows my mind. Now, your next child, Avonlea, now she had the same thing, and plus she had something else too, correct?
Yes, she had the same breathing problem. It was not as severe in her. It generally isn't in girls as it is in boys.
Okay.
However, if she coughed, so if she got a cold and coughed, she actually had to be re-stimulated to breathe after coughing.
Oh, my.
But the story that I want to tell about Avonlea, because this is another problem that's huge in America especially, is she had a problem with candida. She had systemic candida, which at the time was about as hard as Epstein-Barr to diagnose. No one thought it was a real disease.
Absolutely, in the 80s.
and it was affecting her behavior, and the poor child was allergic to everything. It causes food allergies. That's one of the things that happens, and so she was pretty much down to eating boiled chicken and vegetables, and we had a friend that we'd known years before who I hadn't talked to in forever, who out of the blue one day called me up, and to my knowledge had no way of knowing about Avonlea, and said, I just really felt like I needed to call you and tell you the name of this doctor. Oh. I don't know why, but I just need to tell you the name of this doctor. So I said, okay, and I...
It's like, what else, you know?
And I get online, and I start reading about this doctor, and he practiced a county away from us. It was only like a 45-minute drive, but he was an author on the subject of Candida and considered the foremost expert on it in America.
Oh my gosh.
And he had pioneered...
Talk about
all the treatments for it, and so that was just my answer right there. Just a phone call from a woman who had no idea why she was calling to tell me that.
You know, and that's the way it goes, too. It is.
And so I called, and I made an appointment with this doctor, and it was an integrative practice. So he used he was a regular MD, but he used a lot of alternative things because that's basically what was available for us. Mm-hmm. But he was able to totally change her life, totally turn her life around. She could eat regular food again. It was a year of very painful shots,
sure,
and some not so much fun things. But she's great now.
That's
and she's not having any problems at all.
You know, and for those listening, you know, we're laughing here, and you know, we're not laughing because it's funny. It's laughing because in situations like this where it is so traumatic, you have to find humor sometimes in even the simplest of things just to keep your sanity. You know? And I remember situations with my daughter in the hospital. You know, things look so bleak, and we're just like, you know, trying to find, you know, something positive. Now, your other daughter, Emery, she is the one that you had to go to Dallas with? Was that the one that you took to Dallas?
Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one. Now tell that story, because that's another miracle.
It is. My daughter Emery, I love Emery. She's the sweetest thing that was ever born, I'm pretty sure.
All your kids are sweet.
And I'm not prejudiced at all. And I'm not prejudiced at all, but Emery had mild challenges with breathing. Her breathing problems weren't nearly as bad as the older two. Her biggest problem was that she had seizures that were originating from both sides of her brain, mm-hmm. and that she also had a brain lesion. And she was hospitalized multiple times at a nearby children's hospital here in Salt Lake City, but the drugs and the treatments that they were giving her were making the diseases progress faster and making her have more and more and more seizures. Mm-hmm. She just kept getting worse. And she started having just such frequent episodes that she was having problems with confusion and memory loss and learning disabilities, and motor skills were deteriorating. Uh-huh. And in fact, we were down in Arizona, not too far away from where you broadcast from, and she was staying on a tile floor and had a seizure and passed out and broke her collarbone.
Oh, you know? My gosh!
And so it was just it was a hard thing for her, but we couldn't get the help that we needed. And we knew somebody who knew somebody, and it doesn't always work out that way, but we knew somebody who knew somebody, and they had an epilepsy advocate call us and talk to us, and she said, I really feel like there's a doctor in Dallas, Texas that can help you, that he's been able to diagnose and help all these impossible cases.
Sure.
And I really think that if you could just get to him, you know, you could get some help and at least figure out what's going on. And so we made an appointment. We drove down to Dallas. It's a long drive. And every test that doctor did came back positive, every single one. And with her condition, when you're little, it's hard to control the seizures, but once you hit puberty, mm-hmm. it's nearly impossible because the hormones, like with a lot of problems, will make the seizures much, much worse. And under normal circumstances, what they would do is they would actually do surgery. And but with her, surgery was not an option. Mm-hmm. Neither was anything else that they would choose to do. And so he looked at me and he said, "No, we're going to be able to, I think, manage this case until puberty, but then," and he just kind of dropped off, and he didn't finish his sentence. But he didn't need to, because I knew exactly what he was saying.
I know.
He was telling me, or what he was trying not to tell me, was that that at puberty, if they don't figure out a way to stop the seizures, that something called status happens, which basically means you go into a seizure and it doesn't ever stop. And it's life-threatening, obviously. I mean, it will kill you eventually if you go into a seizure that doesn't end. And so something really crazy happened, though, on our drive back from Dallas. We're driving home from Dallas, and then I start coughing, and I cough so hard that I feel like this pop in my neck. And my neck was killing me. I'm talking childbirth pain here.
My
it was
gosh.